one of the most pervasive influences on the planet educationally is Reggio Emilia. The Reggio Emilia preschool in Italy, whatever, and it's everywhere. People cite it in the DNA of their new school initiatives and stuff like that, right? Well, I mean, they're into early childhood and primary grades or whatever, and everybody says, well, wouldn't it be nice to have Reggio Emilia for high school and for university and that kind of stuff, right? Well, great concept, but a child who's 4 years old and somebody who's 20 years old is still the same child, but they have very different needs, very different context, right? So we look at, and I look at schools like the Chaos Pilots, who I think might be Reggio Emilia growing up. I don't know. For some of these schools, how do we allow for the latitude for play, for my environment as a third teacher or a second teacher or whatever, that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of flavors and there's a lot of context, and that's the idea, is to present a range of ideas that could be useful for somebody in this field, parent or educator or administrator.
Right. And I hope it does influence a lot of people to think about creativity, not as some type of after-school curriculum or an arts class or something like that, but something that needs to be ingrained in the DNA of the school. Now, having said that, obviously you just mentioned this, that there's a lot of schools out there beyond the ones that you profile in this book, but there's also a lot of schools who aren't doing this or thinking this way. So my question to you is, and it's a no-brainer to me to include some type of creativity as the main thrust of a school, because I find it to be so valuable and invaluable. Right. So why aren't there more schools having this kind of mindset then?
Oh, really simply. I can show you right here. This is a PDF or one of the illustrations in the book. This one right here. Factors that limit creative development. Okay? So in order to answer that question, you have to understand the nature of creative development. So I have a really simple premise. Okay? And it revolves around the term creative capacity. Creative capacity is the level of sophistication at which one can engage in creative practice. Now, and in this book, I front it with how I define what creative development is. So the question I get asked often is this: are we all creative? Are we all creative? I get off the stage doing a keynote or whatever. How do I get in touch with my creative self? All of those questions get asked that all the time, right? Are we all creative? I would say it's a human trait. It's a part of our species that we are naturally improvisational. We're an improvisational species. We adapt. Watch a preschooler. Watch a 9-month-old. Watch anybody, and we know ourselves. I mean, I have a schematic here, and it's in the book on how I frame creative development. So I think our natural disposition is, I would call it intuitive adaptive creativity. Okay, so that's the way we are. Okay. We adapt. I mean, I have a daughter. My daughter has muscular dystrophy. She's in a wheelchair, and she'll call me, "Dad, can you get my shoe for me?" And I'm busy watching TV or something. I say, "Yeah, I'm coming." And then I walk into her room, and she's got it on, and she corralled it, got a stick. You know what I mean? Stuff like that, right? So we're adaptive. Now the question is, does it get developed? And it developed into what? So then what is creative development? So here's how I frame it. I think creative development is the movement from, or the growth in creative capacity from a natural disposition of intuitive adaptive creativity to the ability or capacity to engage in sustained creativity or creative practice, which is the ability to generate and experiment through several iterations over time, and usually something that's been self-instigated. So I go from adapting just everyday life. What shirt am I going to wear? Oh, I lost a button. I have a rip on my pants. Or I'm going to eat. I don't have these ingredients. So I'm going to make something up. To now I'm going to hypothesize, problem set, experiment, generate, experiment over and over and over again over time in sustained creative practice. So the ability. So my contention is this. Because of all these factors that I have on this schematic here, again, this is in the first chapter in the book, that really limit our creative development. So a simple premise is this: the creative capacity of the educator has to be greater than the creative capacity of the student if you're going to enable an educational environment of creativity. So with that in mind, and sorry to go on here, this is a long answer, but it's a very complex question. The epicenter for me is teacher education, that the professional culture has to advance on a very major way their creative capacity. Okay, so I have to have a teacher. Now, I could have a grade 4 student who's got incredible disposition, who's a self-instigator, who's an investigator, who generates tons of ideas or whatever. If I'm the educator and I'm not nearly at that creative capacity, it's very hard for me to service them and to enable them. So with that in mind, I mean, the very first chapter of the schools is my own program in the Faculty of Education here in Calgary. It's 1/3 of a master's degree, an interdisciplinary MEd degree for teachers. It's called Creativity and Educational Practice. And it's 4 courses. They take over a year. One of 20-some programs they can choose to make up their program, right? So we're just finishing the first cohort now. A new one starts this summer. But it's all about developing creative capacity of the educator. So 4 courses. Creative Practice and Introduction. Course 2 is Creativity and Communication. Course 3, Design Thinking Across the Disciplines. And Course 4, Designing Education for Creativity. The first 3 courses are not about school. They're about creating original work in a variety of contexts. Then we allow them to land back in their schools for Course 4. And after much frustration, they want to go right into the schools right away. But we have to enable a first-hand reference base. We have to grow creative capacity. What is it like to engage in sustained creative practice? And then we apply that back to school design and school practice or whatever. So that's how I'd frame all of that. That's how I'd frame it.
That's brilliant, and that makes sense.